certainly move it along. I'm sure you don't want to be here for tea. All right, everyone, we're starting back. Thank you. Blair. Okay, we were during question time, and I had Councillor King. I had you next on the list.
Just one question for peace of mind for some of our tenants. Could we just make it clear what it is that we're agreeing to for the rest of their lives as far as their right to stay in the unit and the rent that they'll be paying?
So the report makes it very clear that the tenants can remain indefinitely in their properties provided they meet their tenancy obligations, which is things such as good conduct, pay their rent on time. The encumbrances also specify that apart from a rent increase, which would be part of any settlement offer, and we've talked about that today, the rent increases thereafter are limited to a formula which effectively limits the rent increases to something similar to inflation. So that I haven't got the specific wording, but the tenants can expect that beyond any initial rent increase, which may be beyond that, sort of a cost of living type adjustment, that thereafter there is very clear framework around which rent increases can be. So
to make it really clear, they can stay in their unit for the rest of their lives. They may get an 11% rent increase maximum coming up soon.
Correct.
And after that it will be basically inflation adjusted or a similar CPI or a similar model.
Correct. Yes, I mean the model basis sort of takes into account cost of living and other factors, but yes, it's similar to that.
And the cost of living increase at the moment is 1%?
I think it'd be sort of 1 to 2%.
Yeah.
But I think the key there is that provided the tenants meet their obligations, so provided they meet their obligations, which is exactly the same as they are with council now, they can remain there indefinitely.
Thank you. Now, your staff's recommendation, which is accessible properties, option D, how does that compare with the best offer that Habitat have made? And what does that mean to our financial strategy in 2020? And I'll just give you all of these so you can bring them all back and consider where I'm going. And in real dollars, how much better off are we by taking the staff recommendation over the best offer that Habitat have given us? Adjusting for time and adjusting for...
Yes, I understand the question.
For holding funds costs, and so how much better off are we?
I might get the CFO to speak to that one.
Good afternoon again, councillors. The best offer that we have from Accessible is for a settlement of $23.5 million, assuming an 11% rent increase. In today's dollars, that would be $20.5 million, and compared with the best offer that we have from Habitat, which is an immediate settlement, that would be $17 million. The difference in real dollar terms is $23.5 million down to 70, which is $6.5 million more. In terms of the 2020, the figure is at the start of the 2020 financial year, debt under the accessible offer, including the 11%, would be reduced by $21 million, and under the Habitat for Humanity best offer, that would be $17 million. So that's about $4 million better in that critical constraint year that we've got within our financial strategy.
So we're $4 million better off in 2020 if we accept the accessible?
That's correct.
And today, how much better off are we?
In today's terms, it's $3 million.
3 million.
3.5.
So it's what was it? Sorry, 3 today or
$3.5 million today between Habitat and accessible. It's $3 million between the accessible immediate offer and the deferred one.
And sorry, once again in 2020, what's the difference? Adjusted for all costs.
it's $4 million.
So we're $3.5 to $4 million better off
That's correct.
with the staff recommendation of option D.
Correct. I think under all offers, Accessible have offered more money than Habitat. And I think, as the CFO has said, for the critical 2020 financial year, which is where our long-term plan debt to revenue ratio is at its most critical point, we are $4 million better off under the Accessible offer than we have with the Habitat offer in terms of reduced debt. The debt is lower by $4 million under the Accessible offer compared to Habitat 2020.
So we're $3 million better off today. We'd be $4 million better off in 2020. Other things that you've considered are the service level.
Yes, we have, and you will note that the score for the non-financial, I guess the service provisioning, is very close between both Accessible and Habitat, but the team have scored Accessible slightly higher than Habitat, but they're very close.
So on the service level, Accessible just pipped Habitat.
Yes, I think they're both very robust propositions, but the report in paragraph 89 in particular explains why Accessible was scored just slightly higher than Habitat in terms of non-financial, but then in addition to that you then add in the financial difference, which was significantly in favour of Accessible. Accessible are under all scenarios the preferred purchaser.
So we've got price, we've got service level. What else did you consider?
Well, I think if you look at the table under paragraph 86, there are a number of categories there, and those categories are quite extensive, and they pertain to everything from how the organisation, how it's governed, financial viability, its current and future activities.
What page is
that? Page 194. Its tenancy management, its property and asset management, its proposal. So it speaks to the organisation in its entirety, how strong the organisation is, the activities it would offer both now and into the future, the level of service, its experience, how financially sustainable it is. And I do also refer to Appendix 1, and in particular pages 210 through 212, where those criteria are further expanded. And that was the detailed areas that the evaluation was based on. And I would also note that those criteria were strongly aligned to the government evaluation scheme for accredited providers. So we were wanting to, again, put the purchasers through a very similar level of analysis to that the government would do.
So pretty well every step along the way the two organisations are similar, apart from, so in the end it's come down to the money.
I mean, I think the money was a very significant element in favour of Accessible. The service offering and the organisational offerings were very similar, but Accessible was again slightly ahead of Habitat. But in combination, Accessible was in all categories ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I've got a couple of questions. The first one I'll ask was my second question, but it follows on from Councillor King. And I did a calculation a slightly different way, and I based it on the fact that we collected it was based on option B, and then took into account that the fact that we had the $17 million in the hand on the 7th of March, and then we took into account what we would have saved in terms of debt reduction or using elsewhere. And that came back, that correlates back very close to the net present value. In fact, my calculation was 20.84 million versus the net present value of 20.48 million. So I guess what I might be missing here is that the advantage of the deferred settlement is that there is another 3 million, which is the difference between the 20.4 and the 23.5. Is that?
That's correct.
So that's
exactly
my
correct.
methodology, doing it back the other way.
Yes, you're not quite comparing them. Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, you are correct that there is interest savings that would occur, but in any other way to look at this, the accessible offer in absolute terms is $6.5 million higher than the Habitat best offer. So $23.5 million versus $17 million. So, and you noted that there would be $3 million of interest savings, but there's still the offer that they have made is $6.5 million in absolute terms higher than the $17 million today.
Yeah, but it's only 3 million or 3.5 million if we take into account that 18 million of it has been interest-free for 3 years.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
But it's still $3.5 to $4 million higher.
Higher, in absolute terms. Yeah, okay. Second question, you mentioned earlier, Blair, that the rental was largely set for the council to break even in terms of the operating costs and depreciation. Following the sale, perhaps the first part of this question would be, do we account for rates on a standard, normal, rateable basis on these properties?
We rate these properties on a standard normal basis. Yeah, they're rated as residential, multi-unit.
So council does remit its own rates, so that comes into factor there. So yes, they would be rateable as a standard rateable property. They would be a residential property for rating purposes. We then remit that rate back. So what we do is, as part of the calculation, we actually ask the remaining ratepayers effectively to pay for council's rates.
So in the costs, I think, which I've got some benchmarks here, but it looks as if our annual rental is about 2.2 million, our costs are about 1.1, and our depreciation is about $1 million. So included in the costs of 1.1 million, there is no charge for any rates.
Not at this. There is an internal charge for rating of $171,000. That is, as I noted though, from a public ratepayer point perspective, remitted.
So my question then is, following a sale, there would be a brand new revenue stream for rates that we previously haven't had before.
What there would in fact be is a reduction in the rates that we collect from the public by about $171,000, which is the amount that we remit. So the total rates that we collect as a council at the moment are $138.5 million. We have remission on $600,000 worth of council properties. So the total rates that we collect from ratepayers is $139 million. Under this, after a sale, we would in fact be only collecting $138.9 million, would be reduced by about $170,000.
Why is that?
Because the amount that we'd have to remit would only be $459,000, not $630,000.
So I think in simple terms, the total rates remain the same that we collect.
From these units, I'm just looking at these units rather than...
These units will continue to collect the same amount of rates.
Yes.
The ratepayer will move from Hamilton City Council to
the new owner.
Yep. And in terms of what Paul was talking about, the amount that we currently have effectively, we show that we collect these rates, but we also then remit the rates to ourselves. That would disappear, but the amount that we collect from rates from all external parties, including the new purchaser, would remain the same as we collect now.
Okay, so there's no new revenue stream?
No new revenue stream.
Except the... okay, right, understand.
I have a work paper, Councillor, if you wish to see that.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Councillor Forsyth?
Just a couple of questions about accessible. I'm trying to get a gauge of the entity that's in this equation. So what city is accessible housing based in? Wellington. In Wellington. Okay. So all board members are from Wellington?
I can't tell you exactly where they're from, but if we could through you, Your Worship, direct that question to their CEO. I'm sure he can answer.
Yes. Chair, Mr.
So we're a nationwide organisation, so and our board members are throughout the country. Our chair is based in Tauranga, another member is based in Tauranga, Hamilton at the moment, but it is a nationwide operation.
Right, so there's one board member from Hamilton?
No.
No, there's none.
Oh, none. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
We've been involved in social housing in Hamilton for about 60 years, and we manage around about hundreds of life homes
In Waikato?
Yep.
Fewer in Hamilton?
About 60, about 65.
And I think that you've answered my next question in part around why, given the information we've got in front of us, why you rated accessible more highly than, or as the preferred purchaser, and I get the sense that it mainly is because of the financial difference.
I think it needs to be seen as it's a combination of both the non-financial and the financial.
Yeah.
Again, paragraph 89, I think, summarises it quite distinctly, but the financial was significantly in favour of accessible compared to habitat, but all 5 members of the evaluation team did score accessible ahead of habitat in terms of their overall scoring. So accessible...
Markedly?
Sorry?
Just slightly, you said, didn't
Just slightly, but all 5 members, the overall scores ranked habitat ahead of accessible ahead of habitat.
Yeah. So when this weighting matrix was put together, or even applied, what sort of weighting was the local connection and the local content given in all this?
So there was no specific individual category for local. It was effectively throughout the I guess the local element was factored into the consideration of each of the elements, but we didn't specifically say we have one category for local. But I think as you've heard from the General Manager for Accessible, they have a local presence as well. Both entities have a local presence.
Not from a governance level, though.
Correct.
No.
But
And my observation is that Habitat for Humanity, out of its board of 13 directors, 8 reside in Hamilton, and that's just a quick glance. There could be more. I suppose you can see where I'm heading with this. Why was there no metrics or no consideration for the local element? Because really this is a local community issue, a very big issue, and I'm just curious to know why that wasn't a consideration in your metrics.
I think we were looking for the best entity to provide the service to council. Council was looking for the best provider to provide social housing for those in the city. Right. And so our criteria, which was based again on the government criteria, was looking for the best provider, and that was a range of things. And so I guess in the case of one entity, yes, it's a Waikato-based entity, another one is a national entity, and that they each have strengths and weaknesses associated with that. But when you look at those in totality, we still deemed that Accessible scored better. And I guess some of those come down to the fact it's a large, credible organisation, has over 1,000 properties it's administering or owning across New Zealand. It has significant structures in place.
Yeah, I understand all that, but it still doesn't answer my question. Why was there no consideration given in the metrics to the local input, the local effect, the local influence, the local governance? Why was that not a consideration, as I said, in an important local community issue like that?
I think I've answered that question, that we were looking for an organisation that would bring the best skill set to manage these properties.
So it wasn't considered, in other words?
Look, it was built into the criteria through all those elements.
I don't see that, and I certainly don't get that in the answers.
Councillor Pusala, you're being a bit argumentative there. I think he's answered your question.
Yeah,
perhaps a better question is, where is the local content factored in on your pages 210 through to 212 in the criteria that's applied in the matrix? Was it in your assessment of the governance and management? Was it?
I think, as I
What
said,
part
I
was
think,
it
Your Worship,
mostly?
it probably comes into, it certainly came into governance and management. It came into current activities and tenancy management. It's certainly the proposal as well, the section that your proposal, because of course, as we would note, both organisations have to gear up to administer these, and I guess we've noted. So it comes through in flavours throughout.
Right, Councillor Tooman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just a question. With the new owners taking over on March, I think it was sometime, there'd be a new tenancy agreement signed with the existing tenants, I presume.
There would be, yes, I believe that would be the case, but they would certainly, all existing tenancy arrangements would be rolled through, with the exception of there's a rent increase.
So therefore, would the existing tenants become new tenants to that particular landlord, which means that landlord would then be eligible for the rent subsidy available from central government? Would that be correct?
No.
No?
No, they need to be new tenants to new tenants in total. So no, we certainly couldn't, and they can't just, as you described, one name change to another name change to define them as new tenants.
Don't know. Thanks.
I just have some questions in relation to the table 6 on page 194 as it relates to the criteria, pages 210 through 212. So I just want to look at the one that says proposal, and there's a difference in the assessment made there. Just interested on page 212, there seems to be some financial aspects to that non-financial criteria, and I'm just trying to understand how you assess the difference in those under that criteria. What particularly was the difference there?
So just clarify with Nicholas, we excluded the financial consideration in terms of that score. So I guess if you looked at
The number 17,
number
what are you
17
proposing to
was
pay?
not part of the
Okay.
scoring.
So what was the difference there that you identified in terms of your weighting that you gave each of the parties?
I don't have the specific rationale in front of me in terms of the.
I'm just looking to understand then, if 17's out, where was the difference there?
I guess in particular, Worship, without seeing the individual scores, and of course 5 people scored those, it would be in the areas of 20 and 21. What services can you provide new tenants? Your plans for the complexes that you acquire, in terms of what they will look to do to the complexes in the future, renovations, improvements, how they will manage those. It would be scores predominantly in those areas. And
I thought that my reading of the report was that those are pretty similar. Both could provide or have access to similar services for the tenants, and my reading of the reports looked like they pretty much had similar plans for the complexes.
Your Worship, perhaps I could just comment from memory. One particular difference was the very specific detail that Accessible had provided around the number of the number of additional houses that they would be able to provide above and beyond the social housing units that they were purchasing.
That's the after 15 years thing.
Yeah, correct. That was one factor that was quite spelt out clearly in the Accessible proposal. Habitat alluded to development, but it was based more on a post-purchase assessment of the financial viability, and would have been dependent on external factors as well.
Okay. Looking at the criteria of financial viability, where you've scored Habitat higher than Accessible, and that was based on an assessment of balance sheet and access to funding, was it? Or I get systems and processes, but there's obviously something that triggered the difference there.
So, Your Worship, as is seen in the proposals, in the confidential section of the papers, there was additional information supplied by Habitat around cash flows and
Yes.
the modelling that they had as well. That was one of the reasons that I know that I gave them a slightly higher score in that field.
Yes, so that the financial viability one's quite an important one, because that's about their ability long-term to deliver what they're contracted to deliver. And Habitat has been scored higher. Okay?
I think
Sorry, another factor that we would have considered in that financial viability was the fact that the Habitat proposal was effectively a non-deferred payment, so there was very little risk associated with it.
Right.
And although we went into subsequent discussion with Accessible in order to mitigate the risk, at the time that we were looking at that factor, that discussion hadn't been concluded.
Okay, so were you comparing a settle now with a deferred as opposed to a settle now for both in that criteria?
We would have been looking at the best offer that we had on the table at the point of evaluation.
Okay, best offer in financial terms.
Yes, without looking at the specific detail or quantum of that offer.
All right, so a higher weighting then given for settlement now because that eliminates any risks.
That would have been a factor, yes.
Okay. Just looking at current activities in tenancy management, and I'm looking there at, I guess, I mean, it's very clear that there is a difference in terms of each organisation's involvement or extent of their involvement in providing this sort of social housing. Is that the sole sort of factor that's contributed to those differences in scoring there? The fact that Accessible, this is their kind of main occupation, has been for decades.
I would suggest that that was the major reason, Your Worship.
Okay, as opposed, so quantum as opposed to how they do that, irrespective of the number they've got, because Habitat's got a much smaller portfolio offering tenancy management and social housing services, but obviously not to the extent of Accessible.
I think it was a combination of how many they have, how long they've been doing it, the range and experience they have of managing a broad number of properties across a wide area.
Right, as opposed to the quality of delivery and service.
Correct.
Okay, volume. Okay. All right. So with that governance and management score, picking up what Councillor Forsyth said about local, but that's a combination, that category of how you run it and who's involved, as well as sort of planning documents and things like that. Okay. So that's where you factored in the local board factor, mostly?
It was certainly a factor. I have to say that there was a number of matters, as you've noted there, that went into that particular area. And obviously, I would comment that both boards have very credible, skilled people on them. So I think that, there's no question. In fact, the score reflects they're both very similar in that space.
And they, both of them, had or satisfied 4, 5 and 6 in that category?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so possibly about the same, really,
Absolutely.
even though the marking is a little bit different there.
I think you need to
Obviously.
note that there are 5 people scoring these individually,
Yes.
and so there will always be some level of difference, and that's why.
Okay, but is it your assessment that they're probably the same?
Yes, very similar.
Oh,
And in fact, I think that's reflected in the overall scores and in the commentary in my report, that in the non-financial assessment, they are essentially very, very similar, almost the same. So their proposals in a non-financial sense were very compelling and very strong and both very similar in totality.
Okay, and just picking up what I think you said before is the difference in the non-financial scoring is most, I think I've got this right, correct me if I'm wrong, it's mostly connected with the size of Accessible's portfolio and therefore the size of their organisation in delivering this service as opposed to the quality and ability to deliver.
Yeah, I think if I come back to my wording in paragraph 89, where I say that the reason Accessible scored slightly higher than Habitat reflects a well-resourced and governed national organisation with significant and proven experience in social housing provision on a large scale compared with a regional organisation with strong governance model operating with fewer resources or generally more limited range, scale and scope of experience in social housing provision.
Right. Counter that with the scoring and the financial viability of them is higher for Habitat, even though it perhaps is a more modest organisation based
Correct.
on your scoring.
Yes, yep.
Yep.
But I do note that in terms of the, then if we look at the financial side.
Oh yeah, no, I understand the difference on the financial. I'm just interested in the assessment because it's a bit difficult, you see, to mark those things, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. And I just wanted to pick up something that Councillor Pascoe said. And I think it was questions that Councillor King asked too, just about trying to compare what's the real values now, because with one payment today versus one payment, a payment later, are they the same? Are the responses you gave to Councillor King the same as the ones you gave to Councillor Pascoe? Because as Councillor Pascoe said, he came at it a different way, and the difference was about 3 million in real terms. I got different numbers in response to Councillor King's question, so I'm trying to understand what analysis is the right one in simple terms, because I've sort of got 3 figures now.
So, Your Worship,
what's the answer?
The raw figure at $23.5 million compares with $17.5 million for an immediate settlement for Accessible and $17 million for Habitat for Humanity. So there is a $6 million difference there in raw dollars.
That's just on the numbers presented to us. That's easy, yeah.
The net present value calculation that we have done shows that that value has a $3.5 million difference, driven by a combination of the depreciation and the time value of the money. Councillor Pascoe's one of taking the upfront value and then adding the interest that would be saved is only about the time value of the interest effectively. So there will always be a difference because there are other factors that come into that cash flow when arriving at a net present value. So depreciation being the gap between the cash flow. And that creates about a $3 million gap between the figures that we've calculated and the figures that Councillor Pascoe had calculated. So
in simple terms for us, taking out some of the jargon, is Councillor Pascoe's analysis a correct analysis or an acceptable analysis to understand the difference?
I think Councillor Pascoe's calculation highlights the difference between the deferred settlement value and the immediate settlement on a net present value, that there's about a $3 million difference in those values.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other questions from anyone? Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Mallard. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. A question to Blair and then one to our valuers. Blair, just on page 181, where you have the table showing the A to D options, if Council wanted a clean, immediate settlement, the difference really is about $453,000, and that's correct.
That's under option B.
Yes, and does the valuation, the 18 million to 22, is that based on a discounted valuation because the rentals are below market rates?
That is based on yes, it is. And so what that's indicating is that both those offers sit below an assessed valuation of the portfolio with an 11% rental increase applied.
Because of the encumbrances and the...
Correct.
Right.
So both those offers sit below what the valuer has assessed as the valuation range.
Okay, so a question to our valuer. We've talked about the deferred 11% increase that will be on the table today one way or another. Have you looked broadly at the current rentals charged by council for its pensioner units?
Yes, one of the option A was for council not to increase the rentals by the 11%, so that took the current rental charges being received and assumed that they would just naturally increase 2% per annum with an inflationary increase.
Sure, because I was coming to a slightly different point, and I accept that, but are the rentals, how do they compare with the market rents? Because I've always thought that our pensioner housing unit, social housing, is generally a 30% discount off market rentals. But of course, market rentals continue to grow, and there has been, I guess, and you could comment on this, some growth in market rentals. Are we still at about a 30% discount of the market rental, or has there been a slippage over the last 12 months?
The last option I looked at was the full market rental, so we did consider that full market. You'll have to excuse me, I'm going from memory. The existing rental for a single unit with a single occupant is around $113 per week. That was to increase to around $130 per week under the 11% increase. And I'm going from memory here, I think I was looking at around $190 per week as a market rental in the situation. There are some other variations built in for where there's a carport provided, and also under the social housing provisions where there's 2 occupants, there's a slight increase in the rental for that factor.
So would you think that our current market rentals broadly have slipped behind the 30%? In other words, are we discounting greater than 30%? And if so, is there an estimate that could be made? Is it 31% or 32%?
On a comparative basis, with the 11% increase, because I think it's been recognised that is due and warranted. 2 people, a couple living in a 1-bedroom unit, from memory, I believe the rental was about $157 per week, and that would compare with our market assessment of around $185, $190 per week. So that's probably getting closer to your. So there's been slippage because the increase hasn't taken effect. You look at it on that basis, but if the 11% was put in place, we're probably getting back to that differential you were talking about.
Yeah, I suppose I was just concerned that market rentals move more quickly than council can move, and so if we are offering to the pensioner tenants a discount of 30% on market rate, I'm relaxed about that, but has that percentage moved up to 35% discount, or are you saying no, it's still at 30%?
No, he's saying it was with the 11%, wasn't it?
Once the 11% was affected, the comparative would be about 157 per week to about 190. So
it would fall within, to answer the question, what the Deputy Mayor is trying to understand is, as I understand what you're saying, if the 11% goes on, it brings it closer to that 30% discount on market rent.
Yes.
Right, without the 11%, it's falling behind. If I interpret what you said correctly. Right. So does that answers your question? Good. Okay, I've got Councillor Gallagher.
Just a couple of questions, moving away from financial aspects, around the governance. So you're saying that Accessible, they don't have any people who are resident in the Hamilton Waikato area?
In terms of their board?
Yeah.
No, have you just heard that? Obviously, in terms of their staffing, the proposal makes it very clear that they would establish a Hamilton office immediately if they were successful, and they've indicated that they would be employing staff very quickly to establish that Hamilton office. I can't comment on their intentions around their board members.
At board level, that's where your strategy exists.
Yes, sorry.
The complaints procedure.
Sorry?
You know, if there are some issues, you know, where do people just go to staff?
I think Councillor Gallagher probably best to ask those questions if we could. Perhaps the
Sure.
CE could answer
Happy
those questions
to do.
for you.
I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess one thing about, in terms of our local presence for a start, we are a wholly owned entity with IHC. And IHC actually started off originally here as a Waikato entity in its own right. It's continued it set itself up as a nationwide organisation 25 years ago, but then set in place local area associations, branch committees, area associations. That continues in Waikato, is the first thing to say. So there is a Hamilton presence in the overall government structure of IHC. So that's the first thing to say. Second thing just coming through is just on complaints. We have complaints policies. We're actually held to account, but we get quite rigorous scrutiny because we're the largest community housing provider in New Zealand in terms of how we handle complaints, particularly from tenants, and that's through the Community Housing Regulatory Authority. That's I suppose, the watchdog in terms of how we perform. We have internal procedures from that. A lot of those are handled at the management level, and we report to our governments as to how we've handled those complaints. And so that's probably quite normal for a lot of organisations. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I respect, from a governance point of view, you of course govern all of New Zealand in terms of the role.
Yeah.
Where's your closest geographical director currently?
We've got two in Tauranga are the closest, one of which is on the University of Waikato's board. So.
Fourth largest city. Big city, Hamilton.
I guess, I mean, one
You
of
want
the
to buy a house? Martin's got one for you.
Too expensive for you now.
No, I'm just saying this is a national body.
yeah, I think that's probably a comment, Councillor Gallagher. What's your question?
The question is, relatively speaking, Your Worship, is quite simple. I'm not implying a criticism, but Waikato is a significant region. A lot of talent here.
So,
our board is 5 to 6 members, and that's not an uncommon size.
Right.
And what we do is obviously with our board members recruitment skills, and at any one time where those board members come from, there's probably, there's probably some degree of trying to get reasonable geographic representation, but we're also trying to balance that in terms of
Skill base.
skills.
That's fine. Thank you. Can I just ask our staff, can you just remind me, in terms of page 190, and we look at expanding housing for older persons to others, in terms of what I understand is the summary of the accessible proposal, and in 10 years it's 60% of people over 65, 25% between 55 and 65, 15% people under 54. What's our current ratio?
Well, all our tenants are over 60 at the present time.
that's a rule.
Sorry. So all our tenants are over 60 years of age.
65?
Where's Julie? 60. Okay, I don't. Yeah, look, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to get an apples with apples, because this is.
Well, we're certainly we have 100% of tenants in that category beyond 60 years. I don't have the breakdown in terms of age bands beyond that.
So if, in fact, in 10 years' time, with that stock, so I'm just saying, this is just a straight maths question to me. If in 10 years' time, 60% were over 65, what I'm trying to figure out is whether, in fact, in real terms, from an existing stock, that would be a reduction of units that would be occupied by 65 plus. In other words, because obviously this is a.
I think to be clear, councillors, the decision you made 12 months ago was to.
Could you speak a bit more clearly, Blair? Siri couldn't pick you up.
Shall I start again? Council's decision of 12 months ago was to provide social housing, not pensioner housing.
Right.
So that's a decision you made on November last year. So
the majority made.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that did not specify age bands or percentages within bands. So what the accessible offer here has provided for council to consider is what the potential mix or makeup of tenants by age bands will be in 10 years' time based on that wider social housing tenant occupation. And I guess you see there it's a mixture of ages, but they also do comment, I recall, in their proposal in Appendix 8 that they still see the majority of tenants would be of elderly, will be an elderly tenant.
Because I'm just trying to work out a maths equation, because if you actually, quote, have a mix of ages in these properties, which were primarily focused on older, right, then obviously in terms of sheer numbers, the actual number of properties in 10 years' time that may be occupied by older people actually declines.
That's correct, but I think, again, remind Council, the housing options paper identified the wider social housing as the need in the city, not just pensioner housing. And so that was a decision of Council. And so quite naturally, the mix of properties will see a reduction potentially of those existing properties we're selling and tenants over a certain age with a wider demographic mix.
But if you look at, perhaps that's for debate, if we look at population increase and if you look at our figures, over 10 years, 20 years, there's going to be an increasing proportion of people who are over 65. You know, our population is ageing. So what I'm trying to... I think,
Councillor Gallagher, that's absolutely right. It is a debate point, and you should, you know, you can raise that in the debate. I mean, Blair can't answer those questions. You know, the council made a decision about broad social housing, and that's a debate point.
Well, with respect, and I think I'm the only questioner that's been interrupted this afternoon, I'm trying to actually tease out to what degree in this proposal did staff take into account the actual demographics in our own population, that we have an ageing population. What I want to look at, and I think it's relevant.
So that's a question that's been framed. What did you take into account, the ageing population and changes in demographics in assessing these proposals?
Is that what you were asking, Martin?
That's what he was asking.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, we didn't, because that was not a requirement of Council in terms of the resolution. The Council resolved to, in response to, I guess, listening to the third sector, conducting a discussion paper and an options paper and a statement of proposal, the wider social housing was the area of need, not pensioner housing. So we were more interested in understanding how they would address that requirement of Council. I would add that we do know certainly from the accessible proposal that they are looking to provide under option D a minimum of 19 new properties. So they are going to be building additional stock in addition to the properties they purchase. Some of which of that additional properties could well house comparable pensioners.
But in net terms, we potentially are looking at a decline of units that may be occupied by older people.
That's correct, and that is, I guess, in accordance with the wider position that Council took 12 months ago, which was the target market was social housing, not pensioner housing.
And in net terms, given the proven Peggy Koopman Boyden, who we retain, and other people who have predicted an ageing population, in net terms on a percentage proportional basis, that's even a further decline, is it not?
Look, I think that's a matter for debate.
Right.
Well, it's not a debate. It's a figure.
No, I think that's a matter for your debate. I mean, it's Council has made the decision to go to social housing.
Okay, Councillor Mallett, I've got you. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the staff recommendation, and I think there's some very strong recommendations for that. But my question is more to do with once we've made the decision who we're going to pick. And as I said, I'm comfortable with the recommendation from the staff, well articulated. What sort of contractual relationship or situation do we go into? We've got council resolutions, and that has sort of, in non-legal terms, our expectations, aspirations. We've got a proposal from them, which I assume is in non-legal terms, where this is a different kind of contract. So there will be targets and KPIs and that sort of stuff?
So there are two elements to this. So you have enclosed within the papers and currently in the confidential for accessible and the open for habitat, the sale and purchase agreement.
Yep.
In the case of the deferred settlement, which is the staff recommendation, as part of the sale and purchase agreement, there'd be a first ranking mortgage security put in place across all properties. That has very commercially solid or robust terms in terms of targets to stay within, and if there are any breaches or potential breaches, council has remedies. There are also reporting obligations there on accessible in terms of they must supply quarterly accounts and audited annual accounts to council throughout the period of the mortgage, so throughout the 3-year period. In addition to that, across all properties sold, there is an encumbrance placed on the title. So basically it's a legal instrument that only council can change or remove. That encumbrance protects the enduring rights for a minimum of 10 years around social housing provision, around the tenants' rights, and there are very significant financial penalties associated with any breach of those. It's $10,000 plus GST per unit, I'm just going to get this right.
Per unit, multiplied by the number of units in that particular complex.
And that's payable, and I'm just trying to, I may need to get the solicitor's help here. Is that per day, on a breach? So it's quite a significant sum of money. So they...
Per day you'd bank?
No, so not per day. But so if there was a...
Did you know that one?
If there was a complex of 20 units,
yep,
and they didn't meet the encumbrance, there'd be an immediate penalty of $200,000.
Okay.
And that would be until they remedy that.
Okay, now, so can I just... Okay, I'm getting a sense of this. Has this is not an... well, I guess it's a relatively uncommon... Has this model been used elsewhere?
I'll get our solicitor to comment on that.
Just be good to know that someone else has...
Can I just add one other thing,
yeah, sure,
Councillor, before he adds his thing? There, in terms of the encumbrance, there is also 6 monthly reporting to council through the term of the encumbrance. So that's for a minimum of 10 years.
Okay.
And that would come to council providing a range of information outlined in paragraph 174 pertaining to how they are performing their obligations in terms of social housing provision.
Thank you.
Councillor Millett, to answer your question, the model is a well-established model, the memorandum of encumbrance. It's used very similarly in a lot of property development situations. In this case, the penalty has been imposed having regard to an estimate of what the cost to provide alternative accommodation might be.
No.
So we've landed, having regard to the valuer's advice, of about $190 per week market. We've put in $10,000 per unit with an inflation adjustment. So the plan is that there is a breach of the covenant which gives rise to the lack of a resource, the penalty will cover that. And that's
so, sorry, just effectively breaking that down, that means we can take the person out and put them in somewhere else,
well,
pay for the rent somewhere else. Is that sort of...
we don't have an obligation to do that,
okay,
but we would get, as a breach of that covenant, the opportunity to do that if council elected to do so.
Okay. No, that's, thank you. Thanks, Blair. Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No?
Just a couple. Yeah, just around the waiting list for our current social housing. I can't find the numbers there, but can you just describe what that waiting list is?
Yes, we do get that answer. Sorry, I just need to... Four people.
Okay, I thought I read more than that. And what demographic are they?
Who are they?
They're obviously pensioners.
Okay.
Sorry, no, apologies, I got the wrong question. There are 4 vacant units. The waiting list is 12 people. Sorry.
And I know this is...
Well, I don't know all I know is that they would be 12 people who would meet our criteria in accordance with our policy, which would be low-income, elderly applicants.
So at the moment, our waiting list excludes anybody under a certain age?
Our waiting list is very much based on our pensioner housing criteria. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Right, now, Councillor Pascoe, you had signalled a motion. Right, I'll get that on the board. Now, Councillor McPherson, was there you signalled to me that you had given Jude some document, which I haven't seen. So what?
Well, I didn't know it was a requirement. In fact, what you've been asking us to do is to do exactly that.
No, what I'm saying is I haven't seen it. You signalled it early. I haven't seen it, but I understand Jude had some concerns about whether it was a viable one. But where are we at with that now?
The motion is on the screen. Madam Mayor, and I've got an amendment.
Right. Okay. Right, so there's a motion there. Councillor, the Deputy Mayor is seconding the motion and Councillor McPherson has an amendment.
No.
It's a lot simpler than Rob's.
Shorter, much shorter. It's in bigger font too. So.
And to clarify, this is an appropriate motion. It's within the standing orders. Amendment. Sorry.
Just going back up to the motion. That one's pretty short.
Can we take it?
Could I just seek some clarification over the motion?
Yeah. Right.
Is the motion sufficiently wide enough to include the conditions that are going, I'm looking here at the 10-year conditions that are going into the sale and purchase agreement along the lines of the solicitor's update and the questions that have come across the table?
Yes.
The motion doesn't have to be specific about those conditions?
No, because this is just a motion to sell in accordance with the previous resolution, which was attached conditions upon that sale. So I think in simple terms, the encumbrances which we refer to are part and parcel of our sale.
So, sorry, does that, Councillor Pascoe, is your question answered then?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Could we have this emailed to us? Because it's a huge statement. It can't fit on one screen and it's really important. This is a $4 million question and I'd appreciate it if we could have it in front of us either in writing so that we can go over it or email it to us.
So, Councillor Pascoe, what is your
Yes.
motion as it...
Yes, so in terms of what is in the recommendation from management...
Page 183, Councillor.
Page 183... the only changes there, A and B remain as per page 183. Part D, paragraph C changes the word accessible properties. New Zealand Limited for $23.5 million to Habitat for Humanity for $17 million and $47,913 as a consequence of the payment being upfront in one single payment. The Part D disappears and the remainder of the recommendation from management stays as per 183 and 184.
That's correct. I think just
Thank you.
I would just suggest it would be Habitat for Humanity Central North Island, just to be clear and see.
For Humanity Central North Island.
Yes.
This is astonishing.
Yes, Councillor Gallagher.
Just a question. Before, in declining to accept Councillor McPherson's motion, which is now an amendment, you mentioned that Councillor Pascoe had this had been submitted the other night?
Yes, he had signalled to
No,
me that
not,
he was...
not the final part of the motion.
What was the final part that wasn't submitted?
Sorry, what?
Well, this is quite interesting because we have a staff recommendation. I'm not questioning any councillor's right to not accept a staff recommendation.
Right.
What I want to know is what was submitted to the chair of the meeting and when.
No. So Councillor Pascoe signalled to me that he intended to move the motion.
Right.
That he wanted to move the motion. He was yet to determine what the content would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of Councillor McPherson's one, I didn't know that he had a motion, and I understand now in the break it's had to be refined because it was a breach of the rules, and you sorted that out to your satisfaction, right? Yeah.
Okay, my second question is to the Chief Executive, because we've gone through a process where neutrally, independently and etc. the staff recommended Accessible New Zealand as the successful tender based on a set of criteria. Can you just clarify for us and just repeat for us what is the actual real financial difference if the majority of councillors hypothetically choose to accept the motion up on the board?
$4 million.
$4 million, mate.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
$3 million.
$4 million.
Oh, I think
Let's ask
Councillor
staff.
McPherson.
Well, hold on a minute. Let's get the staff to answer. Thank you, Councillor.
So I want to ask, to make sure we use exactly the same terminology, I want to ask the CFO to respond to that question.
So the net present value of the Habitat for Humanity value is $17 million, which is effectively the settlement. The value that we would get from a deferred settlement is $20.5 million. So that's $3.5 million more in today's dollars.
In real terms, if I've got this right, the proposed motion would be transferring or selling the housing stock to the local Habitat for Humanity at a $3.5 million discount over an alternative price.
That's correct.
Cheaper. So that's $3.5 million less
Straight out of the ratepayer.
that the city would receive.
Unbelievable.
No, I just want to just be clear of the.
That's, as the Chief CFO said, yes.
And could I just clarify, in view of the staff recommendation, is there any response to that?
Sorry, Councillor Gallagher, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, in other words, professionally, you still, notwithstanding the debate you've heard today and the discussion, you still stand by the original recommendation.
Well, I think, Councillor Gallagher, that's probably a question they can't answer. They prepared the report and made a recommendation, so that's their view. And councillors now have it's their turn to decide what they want to do. So the staff's position has been articulated in the report. Now, Councillor King, did you have...
Just want to flag that there will be a foreshadowed amendment coming, and that will be the staff recommendation. If there's a seconder for that.
Yeah, no, thanks. All right. Any others? No? Okay. So just looking down at the amendment, could we just go down to that?
That's the one that's easy to read.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Got all the other stuff with it. And that's pretty clear, right? People understand that. So, councillors, in terms of debate, do you want to take this all together?
Yeah.
People comfortable to do it all together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only point, Your Worship, is that if there's a foreshadowed motion coming up afterwards, that may need...
well, the reason I'm asking that is because Councillor King has very clearly articulated what the foreshadowed would be. And
I understand. Yes. But technically, that becomes the amendment only at a later stage.
That's right. If this one fails, then that will be the amendment, your one.
Or if this one succeeds, another way of putting it, that could be the amendment to that.
Yes. Yes. So I'm just asking councillors, given that we are clear about motion, amendment and foreshadowed, are you comfortable to deal with them all together?
Just so I'm clear, one of these is basically trying to refute our earlier resolution that we sell the housing stock.
No, not to these.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what you're going to say. But the other one is about two contending bids. So they're quite different debates.
Okay. So that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm saying, what do you want?
So I wouldn't feel comfortable doing them together.
Okay. So we're going to do debate really on the motion and the amendment, but when we get to the foreshadowed, what you're saying is we then have another go at it if the foreshadowed makes it on. Yep. Yep. All right. Okay. All right, so I'll be going then to the move of the motion to start us off, right, Jude? Yeah. All right, Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wish to speak obviously in favour of the motion, and perhaps if I can just look at the clauses in three. I think there are three parts to the motion that I would like to speak on. The first one is the 11% increase, and I think that brings back to the table a previously agreed increase, which was deferred because of the sale process. So I think that really is just a matter of bringing that back. Second one is the reason for sale, and I guess to me this is a head over heart decision, and I think it takes leadership and courage to move on from a particular area of activity that Councillor McPherson mentioned. This council has been in for 60 odd years. The decision to sell pensioner housing has never been based on money and a desire by this council to sell the assets to reduce debt. This is quite unlike the decision taken by the previous council to sell some housing to reduce debt. The operational landscape has significantly changed since 2012 when the last sale was done, and this recommendation is the best outcome of this recommendation to sell is the best outcome for the following reasons. One, the option to purchase is being offered only to registered housing providers with significant conditions that restrict alternative uses of the properties for at least 10 years, and at the same time offering existing tenants the right to remain at their option. Secondly, a change signalled by central government to incentivise approved providers with both rent subsidies and a capital fund for increasing capital stock, and bearing in mind that this incentivisation is not available to council and never will be available to council as it cannot become an approved provider. So effectively going forward, council has been excluded from participating in that market. And thirdly, there is international evidence, particularly in the UK and in Australia, that social housing providers do provide better wraparound services than those provided by councils in the past. I ask my colleagues to put aside their past beliefs and any predetermined views and look at this report in a way that determines what is in the best interests of both the residents and the city. There can only be one conclusion, and that a sale to the approved social housing provider does provide the best outcome for all of the stakeholders, including the residents in our units at the moment and the ratepayers. The third part that I'd like to talk about is the selection of purchaser, and that has been perhaps the most difficult because the in-depth study here suggests, apart from price, both are in the market, so to speak, and both would be acceptable, I think, to everyone around this table as being an acceptable purchaser. I guess accessible wins in many of the accounts. Habitat, though, provides specifically a local content. They're known to us. Most of us have worked at some stage within Habitat as volunteers in helping to build homes. And many of the non-quantifiable benchmarking of habitat either put them in a better or similar state to accessible. So I ask you to support the motion and leave it at that.
Thank you. I had Councillor Mallett next.
Thank you. Voting against the amendment, I think, is actually, I think Rob was too kind. It's a no-brainer. I don't think that there's any way that we can say that the change of ownership will reduce the quality of service available to the owners of the tenants, the current tenants. The sale has conditions around it which protect them to infinity, which is I've never seen that in a contract anywhere. but they've got an infinity. And in fact, it is very much my expectation that the new provider will have greater skills, greater ability, greater experience, make much more focus on this type of housing. And another factor that Rob brought up was also the accredited housing providers, as we've heard a number of times, are permitted or are capable of bringing more money to the equation, which can be only used to the benefit of the tenants. So to me, the sale, Rob said, it's a head over heart situation. I don't think it is at all. I think it ticks both boxes. It's logically it's the right sense, and with your heart it's the right sense, because I think you're going to get better qualified providers who have got more cash, and people who are actually focused. That's their prime focus. That's their only focus. So I don't see this as a not the people money over people sort of situation. It's not. It's very much an improvement in conditions. I would expect an improvement for conditions of the tenants, and a great result for the ratepayer.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I don't regard this as a head over heart decision either. I think it's a head over heels down a slippery slope to getting council out of a large number of community services, which has been a plan for this council and the previous council for some time. This is a natural progression, unfortunately, which large chunks of the community are not happy with. This is a cut price sale. It is not necessary to sell to achieve the financial outcomes that we ourselves have set in the LTP, even though people are fast using their cell phones while I'm talking. That's fine. The 11%, I know it was several people using their cell phones while talking. That's fine. 11% rent increase now, or 6% in a couple of months and less money for the city, sounds like blackmail to me. That's what's in the proposal for accessible properties. It's a bit like saying, do you want to be hung now, or would you like to be starved to death in a couple of months' time? That's about it, how it sounds to me. I would say, from my point of view, shame on accessible properties and shame on Habitat for Humanity for jumping in because they saw an opportunity without considering the future effects on the community in Hamilton here. Gary has described this as the clauses in the sale and purchase agreement as protection to infinity. I can see a Tui Beer ad there. Yeah, right. And when were we protected to infinity when the power company was sold in Hamilton? And how much did we have to spend to get back control? I predict that in a future council, if we sell everything in the pensioner housing area, we'll be getting back into that game, and it will cost us a lot more to do that than to maintain and improve our current services. This decision, if taken with either organisation, will reduce the housing stock available for older people. There is no doubt about that, both in terms of the quantum and in terms of the percentage. This housing stock proposed for accessible housing is not just for older people, and as the current inhabitants of the pensioner housing stock leave for whatever reason, there are going to be non-elderly people going into that housing. The housing numbers will reduce, the percentage will reduce right at the same point in time, and I have a lot of disagreements with Peggy Koopman-Boyden, but right at the same time that she's assessed that we're going to have greater need in that area. How silly is that to take the public control completely out of that area? One of the problems, in fact, is while there are people that will say right now, yes, we will maintain this housing stock and provide it for elderly people as per the agreement, we, as the representatives of the public and the public themselves, will have no say whatsoever over the policies, rent levels or anything into the future there. So it's already been stated that the future tenants coming in who are not currently in place may have a whole new sort of rental regime in place for them.
even if we maintain it for the current ones. We will be the first council in New Zealand to completely exit this area. Not even John Banks tried to do that completely in Auckland. Is that something to be proud of? I don't think so. This is an important area for the community good that we should be involved in. It is not vital, and I've never said it's vital, that we do it all. We need to be in a position to influence that particular market. If we sell the whole lot, we will have zero influence. Zero. It's called a bagel sometimes. That's how much influence we will have in that area. And we will have, it's no wonder actually that we're getting out of policies like the social wellbeing strategy, Councillor Gallagher, because there'll be no point having social wellbeing strategies or any other strategies except in the financial area, because we won't be having anything that we can influence. It'll be just all nice words that are meaningless. At least in this important area at the moment we have had a say. One of the measures of how well a community is operating is how it looks after and enables all of its members to thrive. Not having any say over this particular area of council work will not help our elderly people who are in need of housing thrive. And that number-wise and percentage-wise, is growing. How does it help to get out of that market? How does it help to put that in the hands of a small group, whether it's accessible housing, who don't have any board members here, or Habitat for Humanity, who grew out of an American organisation, I might add? How does it help to put the control in this area in those hands? I don't think it helps us at all. I think it will help, potentially, if we keep control over a portion of this market so that we can influence that and have a meaningful say. And as a result of that, I'm suggesting that councillors support the amendment which says sale to neither of these parties. I would not necessarily oppose a sale of individual blocks, and I supported in one case a previous sale of a block of housing to an individual provider based in that particular community. And that has worked quite well, and there are grounds for that from time to time. But there is no ground, in my opinion, for holus bolus getting rid of all pensioner housing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Worship. I'm in support of the motion. Councillor Mallett talked about the dollar value, and I think might I suggest that if Councillor Mallett was truly looking after the ratepayer's pocket, he wouldn't have seconded this original proposal when we first put this out for statement of proposal, and he would have gone for the open market situation, which would have returned the highest dollar to the ratepayer, the true highest dollar. I'm speaking in support of the motion and for Habitat for Humanity, but I do want to acknowledge the other potential purchaser also offers many of the benefits that I'm going to talk about. Habitat for Humanity is local, and we have seen up close what they can deliver, in particular the Johnson Street units. Immediately after purchasing those units, they commenced renovations that were long overdue and that we had no budget or ability to do anything with, and they brought them up to a suitable standard. They also implemented social things and wraparound services that we don't offer, like morning teas for their tenants and social events, and they brought about a new sense of community for those tenants, rather than be a landlord, which is what we are. What is important is that all tenants, what Councillor Mallett did point out, is that all tenants can stay indefinitely if that's what they choose. So that gives security of tenancy for them. The decision for me, therefore, is who is best to deliver a sustainable service in this area now and into the future. And no doubt we can do it, but simply just as a landlord, we don't offer any wraparound services that care and support those tenants whatsoever. some of the services that I know Habitat for Humanity offer are things like Meals on Wheels, the community events that I've talked about, educational programs to their tenants, support and social groups. I know that they have a newsletter. Also, their tenant satisfaction is high on their list of priorities, and I'd say that over the years we've done what we've done in a lot of things. We've had a just-in-time approach, a just-in-time priority, and this is reflected in our budget. We put aside $3 million over 10 years. That's not enough. Majority of our units are in need of significant capital investment, and we simply haven't put that in to our 10-year budget. Habitat for Humanity's focus is not on just providing safe, quality social housing, but it's to excel at it. And that's a much higher level of service for those tenants that we've planned for in the next 10 years. And as I've said, with the exception of Sullivan Crescent, our units are in good condition, not excellent condition, but good condition, and do require significant capital investment, of which this council and previous councils have not budgeted for. In the next 20 years in Hamilton, the people aged 65 and over is projected to double from 16,500 in this city to 40,000. That's more than double. Now, we haven't put anything in the budget for that. We haven't planned anything in our future for that. We're not in a position to get government funding like we've heard. So to retain housing stock and simply be a landlord, we would have to significantly look at our budget and invest to meet those projections. And that cost would be in the multi-millions. We haven't done it in the past. I don't see us doing it in the future. Budget and affordability then, therefore, becomes a very serious issue under this population forecast. When we set out to do this process, I believe we have achieved what we set out to do, and that is to sell, first of all, only to social housing providers, to sell to a sympathetic purchaser. I believe Habitat for Humanity is that, to secure ongoing tenancy for all of those current tenants, and to make sure that there was no loss in the number of social housing units available in the city. Well, as well, of course, as addressing city debt for all of the residents. So of equal importance when we started out was getting a good price in return for all the residents, but also I believe top priority was how and who. Oh, thank you. How and who would be the best positioned to deliver the service for the people. And for me, I think the local element that Habitat for Humanity offers, and the fact that we know and have seen what they have done, is where I'm putting the weight of my decision. They're giving it that it's local to Habitat for Humanity, and not simply in this instance going with a higher price tag.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this? Councillor Gallagher?
One thing I respect about Councillor Mallett is one knows where one stands.
There's a lot more things than one.
And he clearly outlines his political philosophy. I suspect this motion is something of a sort of a the main motion, which there's another amendment, and I understand if I can clarify there'll be opportunity for debate of the foreshadowed amendment. But the motion before it is something of a conscience motion. Make us feel better. Have a local provider. Councillor Pascoe described this decision as being head over heart. Her Worship the Mayor in the previous term of council described council ownership of pension housing in this city as baggage of the past. The implication being that heart and head are somehow separate entities that they're not interlinked. The people are incapable of having a philosophy that believes in the community and a philosophy that says there is a role for central and local government in these areas, as has been the case in this country since the 1930s. Other local authorities and mayors, deputy mayors, which we deeply respect, Leanne Dalziel, Vicky Buck, the Christchurch City Council, looked at a way that they could be partners with their local equivalents of Habitat, Accessible, etc., etc. And they still had a role. And let me absolutely state, I have no disrespect at all for Habitat, Accessible and other social housing providers who I think are making a great contribution. Councillor O'Leary said that our 65 plus population is going to double. And I'd ask Councillor O'Leary, can you please tell me why it would not be better for Accessible or Habitat to take their respective amount of money and build new units for social housing, new units for social housing? Because I want to assure Councillor Pascoe, even School C Maths enables me to add up. And School Certificate Maths, this is the head bit now, is telling me that if those organisations take their money and build new housing stock in addition to our current housing stock, that is more housing stock for our older people and the socially disadvantaged in this city. And that is the head working. The head's trying to address the time bomb that is in front of us in terms of our ageing population. And if we take an article by Bernard Hickey, very good opinion piece, where he talked about the Salvation Army report into housing baby boomers in retirement are being exposed to the deepest fault line in New Zealand society and its economy, home ownership. Currently, the proportion of home ownership in this country is declining. That means that more and more older New Zealanders, unless we solve that issue, will not be in their own homes. And the current rate of superannuation is basically predicated on people retaining a mortgage-free house. This in no way is going to help our ageing population at all. Other councillors alluded, I think it was Councillor Leary, said about the social services, this wonderful thing that only somehow if you live in an accessible New Zealand or a Habitat property, you get all these wraparound social services. Here's the reality. Groups like Enliven, YWCA Meals on Wheels provide these wraparound social services irrespective of whether you own your house or not. The social services should be blind as to the status of ownership of your property. And if you happen to have the good fortune to own your house, those social services should still come in. If because of other circumstances you need rental accommodation, and a proportion of our elderly are in our city council accommodation, as another proportion are in our Housing New Zealand accommodation, another proportion could be in new Habitat property, and another proportion, believe it or not, could be a new accessible New Zealand property, those social services should be blind as to who in fact is the landlord or the owner of that property. So quite frankly, that argument does not wash. Councillor McPherson, in my view, is absolutely right.
I'll second.
I won't take too long. Councillor McPherson's let's call this debate for what it is. This is a political, philosophical fault line in this council. In fact, in my view, this council is even to the right of our government MPs. They're centrist by comparison. They themselves came to a public meeting and joined, I think, with the community with some concern and expressed their concerns about our road. So please don't think you're getting wholehearted support from your two government MPs. You're absolutely not, in my view. That's as it is. That's as it is. Your Worship, Where I agree with the majority of this council, I will say so, and don't get me wrong, I think there's some positive things happening in this city. Positive things. River, historic, potentially historic. But today is all about the final, I think, nail in the coffin of 60 years or so of proud history, of great mayors, Dennis Rogers, Rod Braithwaite, Mike Minogue, Ross Jansen, Margaret Evans, Russ Remington. You might have disagreed with him, but even David Braithwaite wouldn't have sold the pension housing. Bob Simcock, Michael Redman, none of those councils had it on their agenda at all to sell pension housing. So today is quite historic. And I think what you're doing today is a terrible decision in that it adds not one iota to housing stock in this city, when a partnership approach could have at least added more, and started to actually address the issue of ageing population. I will be opposing the original motion and supporting the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers for? Councillor King.
To use Councillor Pascoe's words, we're absolutely $3.5 million better off with Accessible's offer over Habitat's. I believe his motion is folly, especially coming from an accountant, someone who should know better. Councillor Forsyth has raised the point along the lines of how can Accessible run this housing as well as Habitat when there's no board members living in Hamilton.
Point of order, I don't actually believe I said that. I just asked about the composition of the board. I didn't suggest that Accessible couldn't run it.
Yeah, no, that's actually correct. You didn't say that.
Councillor Forsyth raised questions around the difference in the board makeup between Habitat being local and Accessible being national. This amuses me when Councillor Forsyth sits in this council and lives outside of the city. The best people from anywhere in New Zealand should be able to come in and sit on a board and run it properly. You choose the best people, not a person on where they're located. Accessible have said that they'll open an office here, and they have said that they have systems in place to influence board decisions even if they don't have people living in the area. They've said they'll open an office, they said they'll man it with locals. And by implication, he has said that they will look at putting board members on in the future. I'm sure they'll consider that. This is a $3.5 million vote. And more than that, Accessible have also said that they intend to build more social housing in our city. Councillor O'Leary has suggested that Habitat could run it better.
No, point of order, I didn't suggest that at all. In fact, I started my debate with acknowledging Accessible, that they offered many and most of the same services. He's wrong.
Yeah, no.
No, I think
Councillor O'Leary suggested that Habitat could run it better because they had local members on the board. I didn't get a chance to finish my sentence.
Well, I'm allowed to do a point of order.
Okay,
so
you're interrupting me halfway through a sentence.
Come on, guys.
This isn't what our staff are saying. Our staff report says that Accessible actually can run it well. During questioning, the Mayor has asked questions around how Habitat have got a stronger financial position in the report than Accessible. Staff have come back and clearly said that was based on the cash offer. Now, I know enough to know that a 20% deposit in a rising market with a first mortgage on the properties is a very secure investment for the city while we're waiting for the other money to come. These properties are only going to go up in value, not down. On top of that, Accessible actually did make a cash offer, but the city's chosen to go, the staff have recommended that we go with D because we are actually millions of dollars better off by going with D than we would be with the cash offer. We all know that those behind the Habitat offer, and we like them, and we like the companies who are behind them, and most of us have been involved in bits in what they've done in the past. We like what they stand for, we like what they do, and we like the companies behind them. But that's not a reason to give away $3.5 million on a silver platter right now, today. It's our ratepayers' money. We have a responsibility to the ratepayer. As Councillor Pascoe has said, he's putting heart before head. There's no evidence in any of our
I'm
reports.
putting my head before my heart.
Okay, you're putting your head before your heart.
Round the wrong way.
So the head before the heart, I can't quite work that out. That's a $3.5 million head before heart from an accountant. Amazing.
Move an extension.
I'll second.
This isn't based on evidence. All the report, everything in this report, all the evidence in the report is based on the evidence that Accessible can do it better and that their offer is way better financially. Just be careful that you're not buying into an old boys club, everyone around this table, and what we're doing here. You may laugh, you may snigger, but just think about what you're doing. I believe this is wrong on so many levels. I believe your conscience is telling you what's right, but you're trying to justify making a decision the other way.
Okay, any other speakers, for or against?
I just have a question. To be clear, Andrew spoke really, really well, but he seemed to be addressing the second thing. Am I right in saying we're actually only debating at the moment? We are going to debate the habitat versus accessible land.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
Sorry.
it's the we're re-debating the other two.
Okay. Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was privileged to see a photo just today of a 101-year-old boarding an aircraft and flying to Christchurch. And just for a moment I reflected on the amazing contribution our elderly, our pensioners have made to society and New Zealand in general. The things that they will have seen, the taxes they will have paid, the families that they would have brought into, or the children they would have brought into this world. And here we are, making their lives more and more challenging at the very time we should be showing our unfettered respect. I will have a lot to say in a few minutes when we debate the next part. But right now I'm focusing on the amendment, which I support. And I support the amendment because the suggestion to sell pensioner housing, irrespective of the recipient or the purchaser, in my opinion, is a foolish decision. I accept that this council, in its wisdom, has chosen to pursue such endeavours, but I'm somebody who never gives up on hope. And I'm hoping that at this moment in time, we can show some maturity and reflect and change a poor decision. And just some very quick observations. The current proposal means we would be selling at the very least these assets that the ratepayers of Hamilton over a number of years, 60-odd years, has invested in at nearly 25% below government valuation. The people we should be spending time in respecting would be given an immediate rent increase of some 11%. And the commitment to the pensioners that they could stay in their homes is meaningless in light of the fact there is no rental cap. So a rental mechanism can drive them out of their home, because currently we'll whack them with an 11% and then it can only be adjusted to inflation. But before you know it, they can't afford to live there. The reality is, if these groups like Habitat for Humanity and Accessible are so committed to social housing, are so driven by making a contribution to New Zealand society, then invest the same amount of money into new housing. But they don't want to do that because, in fact, beyond the facade, it's driven by commercial ambition. This is profit-driven. And it's fascinating that some people around this chamber who celebrate the free market can sometimes be selective in their memory. The reason that these commercial operators are keen on this is because taxpayers and ratepayers have already paid the big money, and the private sector will reap the economic benefit that we've already prepaid.
Point of order, Worship. I'm not sure that Habitat for Humanity or Accessible are private sector. I would like that clarified.
Well, the private sector in the sense that they are not either owned or an entity of government.
Is that a point of order, Your Worship?
Yes, she's seeking...
seeking the veracity.
So if someone disagrees with the speech...
I've got the point of order. Blair, just confirm both of these organisations have got charitable status, have they? Or what are they? They're non-profits. What's their status? Charitable trust?
We're a charitable organisation.
Right.
We're not-for-profits. We're tax-free, so everything, and the same Habitat.
Point of order, Your Worship.
So, no,
sorry. No, I've got...
I'm sorry, Councillor McPherson, but I am letting the Speaker complete what they were saying, and then I will take your point of order.
Thank you.
Yes?
So charitable organisation, not-for-profit, all of the operating services that are generated from the operation of social housing go back into social housing.
Thank you. And it's the same with Habitat, is it? Right, thank you.
My point of order, Your Worship, is that if that is the case, then how come their finances are not available to the public?
So that's not a point of order.
Well, it's as much as Councillor Forsyth's
in terms of your point of order, Councillor Forsyth, I'm accepting it. Councillor Wilson, you've heard the response.
It's biased.
I think since my time is nearly up,
I move an extension, Your Worship. Second. The time's been continuing while the discussion on the point of order happened.
So carrying on, Councillor Wilson.
I simply want to recap why the whole suggestion of selling pensioner housing is poorly formed and I think wrong is, again, we're selling them at a fire sale. We're abandoning and turning our back on the very part of the community that we're all here to help and work for and have already made a significant contribution to this city. And I just ask you all to take a moment of reflection and see if this is actually what you want to do.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? No? So, Councillor Pesca, you... Oh, sorry, Councillor Forsyth. Yes.
Thank you. Very quickly. I just want to share a little story with you. My nephew and his family had nowhere to live, so they moved in with us. We had a 3-bedroom home and there were 13 of us. It was very cramped. We moved 7 times in 20 years. Different things kept us on the move. Rent increases, sales by owners, unhealthy homes, or the need for more space. Moving into our Habitat home has
Point of order, Your Worship.
And peace.
Point of order. The debate is on the accessible properties versus not accepting either offer. The debate is not on the Habitat for Humanity foreshadowed motion, surely.
Well, to be honest, Councillor McPherson, it's been a really good debate.
Well, there's been quite a number of interruptions of a couple of speakers.
Let me finish. You raised the question, I'm answering you. Councillors know what is before the council to debate, and I don't see anything wrong with what Councillor Forsyth is saying, so I'm overruling you.
So I did forget to say that I'm speaking in support of the motion.
Can I just have a point of order here? With all due respect, how do we know this is even true?
Well, it must be because Councillor Forsyth's saying it.
Yeah, no, with all due respect, I mean, you haven't just made that up now. I mean, I could make up lots and lots of stories. And, there are things called parables and all sorts of stuff. So,
That's a good point. I think we all tell stories in our own right. I mean, we could very well say that the story that Councillor Wilson retold a couple of minutes ago, how do we know that happened? Presumably it did.
I can show you the photo. He flew Kiwi Regional Airlines.
Exactly.
He's got
There's a bit of evidence to support his one.
Sorry, which airline was that again?
Kiwi Regional Airlines.
The green one.
Okay, so let's stop.
And they're local.
And they are. And all the directors.
And the borders too.
And we fly out of Tauranga.
Okay.
Can I continue?
You can
Thank
carry
you.
on, then.
So moving into our Habitat home has given us stability and peace of mind. Our children can always come back to their home and know there will always be someone there. We are not constantly moving around, it just means peace. We are on the ladder to home ownership. We can plan for our future, we can create our own home and leave a place for our children and our grandchildren's future. Now, that is from the Dornan family from Hamilton who moved into their Habitat for Humanity home in 2012. And if you want to read more about it, you can go to the Habitat for Humanity website. So the reason I'm telling you this story is because Habitat for Humanity are more than just social providers. Sure, they provide for all sectors of the community, but I think we've missed a really important point here. Habitat for Humanity assist people in owning their own home, and Councillor Gallagher so correctly pointed out earlier, the Kiwi dream of owning your own home, and for some people, for many people, is just a dream. Habitat for Humanity will not only assist the existing people, tenants in their homes now, but they will have the capacity, it's part of their philosophy, to assist people to own their own homes, and that to me is one of the defining factors about making this decision.
Point of order, Your Worship. I understood the staff report to say that these houses, units were for rent, not for ownership, future ownership. Is there something that we haven't yet heard that Councillor Forsyth...
I don't hear Councillor Forsyth's debate as saying anything other
No, she's implying that the units are going to be able to be bought by the tenants.
I'm not hearing her pitch it in that term at all.
Well, no.
So I'm overruling
I'm quite sure you will, Your Worship, given that you two are on the same side.
Oh, look, Councillor...
Well, no, it's obvious. You've ruled every point of order on the other side out, and you've accepted hers. No
Carry on,
problems.
thanks, Councillor Forsyth.
So it's the philosophy of Habitat for Humanity, which is, I think, a critical part of my, well, it is a critical part of my decision making. The other part of my decision making around this Habitat for Humanity option is that I do think local versus central governance is a priority. It is important. And as I said earlier, if I look to the board composition of Habitat for Humanity, chaired by John Gallagher, joined since 1998. I mean, who could ask for a more successful, experienced man of our community, former city councillor, John Birch, Lynette Flowers, Michael Jackson, partner of Tompkins Wake, Hedda White, and here's the big one for me, Hedda White. And if you don't know who Hedda is, she's the director of the Māori Wintec, or former head of Department of Māori Studies and Māori Liaison Tutor. She's a member of Creative Communities New Zealand, a member of Waikato Raupatu Lands Trust, member of Tūranga Waiwai Marae Committee. So there's your local input. There's your local flavour. I don't see any iwi representation on the accessible board, and that's an important part of who we are, of the people that will be serviced and will be, whose needs will be met. And look, I just want to clarify. I'll leave that. No, I won't say anything more. But I do, in closing, want to say that it is a philosophical position that we all take here. And philosophically, for me, it's not all about the money. If it were all about the money, we would be going to the open market. If it were all about the money, I would be going to the accessible option. It's a bigger picture. And I think it's a heart decision as well as a head.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? So, right reply.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to speak. I did start the debate off with head over heart, and did plead with my colleagues that they might put their heads over their hearts. And unfortunately, we did hear quite a number of emotional pleas and some emotions which weren't really based on facts. Comments such as cut price, fire sale, not at all supported by the valuation figures in paragraph 12, where, if you want to have another look, just to confirm, the valuation figures from Telford Young are fairly well in line with the prices that have been tendered by the two social housing providers. So it's not a fire sale. We're not selling at a cut price. We're selling very, very close to the independent market values which Telford Young have come back to us. The other comment about the 11% increase, if that councillor had been listening to the valuer from Telford Young when he was answering Councillor Chesterman's questions, would have quickly identified that after the 11% increase has been implemented, there is still a 30% discount on the market rate. So the 11%, and councillors should remember, the 11% had previously been agreed to and had been deferred while this process was going on. So, so it's not an increase to make the offer any more attractive. And the final comment about my professional standing as a chartered accountant, and with 43 years experience as a chartered accountant, one of the things that I have learned is that sometimes the highest price is not always that agreeable with all the decision makers. Choosing the best people generally are. Thank you.
Right, so we're going to go to the board to vote on the amendment. We can up there now.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Can I just confirm whether there is iwi representation on accessible board, because we were told during one of the speeches that they didn't see any
Do you have
Māori representation or iwi
representation on your board?
Not currently, but that's
No.
we are thinking of considering.
Okay.
One of the things about our board is that we've gone through a period of substantial growth. We need some particular skills for that phase. And as we go forward, the composition of that board is going to change. And one of the things we are intending to do is iwi representation.
Thank you for answering that. Okay, so councillors, we're voting on the amendment, right? That up there on the board.
The amendment has been lost, 3 votes to 9.
Thank you. Now, Councillor King, you had a shadowed amendment.
the staff recommendation?
Yes. So there's now another amendment, councillors, and that is the staff recommendation as it is written.
As it's written.
As it is written. And who is seconding that? Councillor Mallett is seconding that. Okay, so councillors, are you clear? The amendment is the staff recommendation. So it's another amendment now, and we still have the original motion on the table. So what I said before was we would re-debate this in entirety, so amendment motion, and then we'll go to the voting. Okay. So I don't think we need to, I mean, you'll get it up on the board, but I think people are clear. So, Councillor King, do you want to...
It's not my motion.
No, it's not, but you've raised the amendment, so I'm coming to you. Do you want to speak?
I thought the mover of the motion gets the right to speak
It
first.
does, yes. Do you want to speak
well,
again?
I've already spoken once, and I would be simply repeating the same again. So I'm happy not to speak.
Okay.
I'll reserve my right.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Any speakers for or against? Councillor Mallett.
Yeah, I'll speak in favour of the, just to be clear, the amendment. Yep, the amendment, thank you. And it's as obvious as the nose on my face that the staff who have done the work in this have scored the two, both obviously very credible, very competent, very sympathetic providers of housing, of social and pensioner housing. Our staff have been through a reasonably rigorous process, and they have come out quite strongly in favour of accessible. So I'm very, very convinced from everything I've heard today, from the staff, the responses to staff answers, from what I've read in the report, from the questions other colleagues have asked when they've been challenging the staff, that accessible is A, the better provider, and secondly, clearly, it's also the best deal in terms of ratepayers reducing debt. So I think it's very, very clear that there is one provider that is better than the other. The discussion about, to be honest, I was cringing a little bit with some of the questions. It sounded like we were a little hick town that was embarrassed about how small we were. We weren't being represented. Some of the stuff that was being asked of the staff and of the CEO of Accessible was, to me, sounded like people had already made their mind up and were trying to justify a different position than the staff had recommended. But anyway, we've all got our right to ask questions. So I'm very supportive of the amendment, which is, to be quite clear, that we sell the properties to Accessible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I oppose the amendment, but I oppose the original motion even more. I don't think, as everyone knows, that we should be selling these properties at all. I'm not going to belabour that point. If we are going to sell them, I think it's, I'm not sure what the right word's, lunacy, folly, misappropriation of funds, or what. This is my opinion, Councillor Pascoe. you're a qualified accountant, you will know that a figure that's $3 million, $3.5 million higher than another.
I certainly know the definition of misappropriation. And it's not.
So what's the definition of misappropriation? You could enlighten us.
It's not what you're talking
about. Come on, we're in debate.
Well, I know we're in debate, Your Worship, so perhaps you could ask Councillor Pascoe to be quiet while I'm debating. At least he has a point of order, of course.
If you engage with him, you're going to get the banter across
No.
the table.
Oh, okay, so anyone that mentions anyone else, it's fair game for them to reply in the middle of the debate.
No, Councillor McPherson, we're actually interested in what you've got to say, so get
Well,
on
no,
with it.
Councillor Pascoe interrupted. I was fine.
Get on with it.
I was going to go through the rest of the council as well.
Go for it.
Anyone that can count will know that a figure that's $3.5 million higher is financially better. Okay, I accept that's not the only issue that we're looking at. We're looking at some other ones as well. Can they deliver in several other ways? And clearly, if you're comparing the two, there's very little between them, except that one may have a Māori member of the board. That's good. Is that something that's worth $3.5 million to this council and the ratepayers here? I doubt it. There could be a couple of exceptional Māori around, but that's not been suggested as the value of the Māori member of the Habitat for Humanity board. Habitat for Humanity is not a local organisation. It may have a local affiliate, and if you look up the website, that's the precise term that's used for them, affiliates. It may have a local affiliate. But I think more importantly, Habitat for Humanity has some very strong links with some of the members of this council. And I think that is why we have this resolution, proposed motion before us, and that is why we're having this particular debate, only because there are some very strong supporters in this room of that organisation who have worked for them and with them in the past and have some business links perhaps, certainly community links. Is that worth $3.5 million? Is that worth the ratepayers of the city? If they are going to flog this stuff off in a fire sale, should they flog it off for $17 million or $20.5 million? Why don't we go for the $20.5 million? If we're going to be hung, we may as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb, because that's what it amounts to. I think I can't believe, if I wasn't aware of the political situation here, I could not believe that we would be foregoing $3.5 million because we were mates with some of the people on the organisation that was offering the cheaper price.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Somebody once said the most terrifying words in the English language is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Ronald Reagan.
One of my preferred favourite sayings is, while the legislator is in session, nobody's property rights or assets are safe. And I sit here today and I'm just astonished. I'm not for selling the pensioner housing at all. You know that's my position. But if we are going to be dragged down the path of abandoning the pensioners, at least do it for a financial benefit to the balance of the ratepayers. Let's have some faith in the staff who've gone off and done the due diligence and has identified a bidder who's capable, fit for purpose, and is about to spend or pay us $3.5 million more than the other bidder. And the only tiny thread of justification that those who are suggesting we permit Habitat for Humanity to get the deal of the century is that they've got some local board representation. They've got Māori on their board. And they are a good bunch of people who have done a lot of good work. Well, that implies that, in fact, accessible isn't. And I see no proof of that. So I will be absolutely astonished if this chamber turns its back on the staff report, abandons $3.5 million on the table, and supports the local guy over a nationally recognised entity capable of doing the job and prepared to spend $3.5 million for it, extra. So from my point of view, if this chamber in its wisdom decides to do that, I would imagine every New Zealander will be looking at us and going, why? What's the motivation? Who do these people know that would make them make this type of decision against their own staff report and the 3.5 million reasons why you wouldn't? But hey, look, I've only been in local government for 12 years and I've seen some pretty bad decisions, but this one would attract national attention. This one would be on the front page of every newspaper in the country saying, what is going on in Hamilton? Not only have they abandoned the pensioners, but they're selling the property much less than it's valued, much less than what the staff have recommended, and to a party that the staff didn't recommend they sell it to. Boy, an election next year? Good one defending that position.
Thank you. Other speakers? Okay, Councillor Toome and then Councillor Gallagher.
Your Worship, so far this afternoon I think we spent about 3.5 hours talking about this subject. When I look at the report which the staff have made, which according to my calculation is 114 pages, God knows how many weeks it took them to write this report. I've got to say thanks very much to the staff. When I look at page 194 and the matrix which has been drawn up there, really gives me all the answers that I want. They've allocated so many points to the area which is the non-financial area, and according to my calculations, and that accessible comes out 5% ahead of habitat. And when you look at the financial part, accessible comes out 11% of habitat. So I see it really as a no-brainer. I suppose what it is you've got to, the decision has been made to sell the pensioner houses. Okay, let's go along with that. So let's try and now get the best deal for the residents of those houses, and according to the matrix which has been drawn up, they're going to be better off by 5% under accessible, and financially this council is going to be better off by 11% by selling to accessible. It's really a no-brainer as far as I can see, and there's really only one horse in this race, and that's accessible.
Okay, Councillor Gallagher.
As you know, I don't agree with the sale, full stop. I want to assure the mover of the original motion that my head is really working now, and my, as it was at the time, school certificate maths is really working really well.
NCEA now.
I get a difference. I get the difference, all other things being equal. This decision, if you go with the original motion, also has a potential challenge, because you had two finalists who entered into a process in all good faith. You had a objective, professional, detached weighting, and I accept that in terms of the great bigger debate, by accident, and I'm sure it's by accident, I might give the staff a hard time from time to time. What I'm not questioning at all is their integrity and their process and the professional process which they engage in to act on a council resolution of the time. What they may feel individually is not relevant. They were given a task to do that within legislature, within acts of the parliament, within due process, and using their heads, they actually have weighted a proposal and brought back this recommendation to us. Can I place on record that I have huge admiration for Habitat, great international organisation, President Jimmy Carter, right from President Jimmy Carter to a person who I know very well, the current chair of the local branch. Of course I have huge admiration for the governors and the directors and the staff and the team, and like most people you've been involved in banging a few nails from time to time and been to events, and trust me, I have huge admiration for how they have uplifted and transformed lives of families. Equally, and this is the heart also speaking, I have huge admiration for the IHC, who have transformed in their journey, their historical journey, who have transformed dramatically the lives of many families and New Zealanders. And while philosophically I might want Accessible and Habitat to use that money to build new stock, and I still have that view, to somehow imply that IHC and Accessible don't have strong roots in this community, Christopher Park. Those of us old enough around remember Christopher Park.
Yep.
All right? Please, to me, in the end, yes, there will be an aspect of local governance, but in the end, there is no doubt that both parties are equal to the task, and that's been reflected in the objective neutral scoring. But one party has the advantage that if you're going to go ahead with this, one party can actually put more on the table. And I don't, with sincerity and as huge admiration as I have for Habitat in the wonderful work they do, and I'd be urging them to put the money they've brought to the table today, carry on doing your wonderful work, put the money into those areas, please, and please, I have huge admiration for them. I also have admiration for the IHC, and I don't think being fiscally, financially responsible, we can afford to transfer our pensioner housing at a $3.5 million or whatever discount. So in that sense, I agree with Councillor Tooman and Mallet. The financially responsible thing to do will be to support the amendment.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, Councillor Forsyth, then I'll go to Councillor Kane.
Thanks. I just wanted to reiterate that this is a philosophical debate. It is about your philosophical position, and at the end of the day, it's not all about the money. And there have been numerous decisions that this council has made in the past for many years where it has not always been about the money. And I challenge those councillors around the table who supported the sale of the pensioner houses in the first place, and supported at that point the social context rather than the open market context. So if it were all about the money, as I've said, we wouldn't have gone and taken great pains and great lengths to look after the existing tenants. And let's all remind ourselves that the current tenants have security of tenancy forever, and that wraparound services will continue or will be added. So it's not about the money. It's about the best outcome for the city. It's about the best outcome for those people in our community that need that support. And that means the aged, but it also means the young and single, and the young with families. And the ability and their dream to be in a home managed and governed by local people with their heart in our community is the most important philosophy for me.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Clearly those who support the motion think they know better than staff. A group in this room have had their own way for a long time, pushing their own agenda. But this time, you've gone too far. When the public hear what was proposed today, they'll shake their heads in disbelief. I reject that this is a philosophical debate. I believe those who support the motion think legal theft of the ratepayers' money is okay.
Okay, thank you. Right, any others? Okay, voting. So we're voting on the amendment, which is the staff recommendation. Is this right? We're all clear?
Just to be clear, that's the accessible.
That's the accessible one, yeah.
The amendment has been carried, 7 votes to 5.
Okay, that's now the motion. So we're voting on the motion. Councillors, going to the board.
The motion has been carried, 10 votes to 2.
Thank you, staff, for all your work, and thank you for everyone else coming. Now, councillors, there's tea has been sitting in the room for about nearly an hour, I think. So we're now breaking for tea, and we're coming back at
We're going to get something, this and that one. And we're going to
6:15. Thank you.
Actually,
6:15.
6:15.